Hello, 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 my friends. Thank you for joining me. I am Nicholas W. Fuller, and today is a very special day with a very special episode because today is the launch day of Joshua Walker's debut novel. Whoo, whoo. Perfect,
I love that.
perfect.
That's great.
Yeah. Joshua, how you feeling, man? Like today is launch day. You feeling pretty hype? You excited, or is it like are you super nervous? What's the feeling, my friend?
Yeah, I'm pumped and I'm tired as hell. It's a mixture of those two things mostly.
That's fair. That's fair. How you know, I know you've already gotten, a little bit of like early feedback and stuff. Has that been feeling pretty good?
Yep, it's looking really positive so far. So, um, you know, um, obviously some of you guys have read the book or parts of it. A lot of other creators have already started writing reviews in. It's looking really good. So I think it took a while to get there, but what came out on the other end of the long and arduous editing period
Right.
was really like a polished turd, you know.
Well, I don't know about turd. No, it's definitely got some polish. Yeah, and it's like you've taken some time to make this a beautiful book. Not only of course did your own writing, but you invested into some different professional services. You don't have it with you, do you?
I don't have a physical copy just yet.
Yeah,
There's been
we'll
a
have
few
to.
issues with that, but yeah, we're getting there. So
I'm gonna put
yeah,
the cover on the
Wow.
screen for the actual video. So let's pretend
sounds
right now,
great.
Josh, that we have the cover on the screen.
Wow.
This cover is
Yeah,
awesome,
we'll
dude.
look
You're
at
like,
the thing.
can you tell us about you tell us about who did the cover, Josh?
Yeah, so the cover is the legendary Jeff Brown, who was a joy to work with. He's an absolute genius, and he was able to kind of draft this cover up kind of right in front of my eyes for the first time in about 15 minutes. Which
Wow.
was just nuts. And it was cool to watch his process actually. And then he kind of took that away and spent a couple more months refining it. And this is what we got. Just wonderful. It's large scale. I think it captures a lot of what I like about the world building in the story, like perfectly. I don't think it gives anything away plot wise, which is also a good thing. So yeah, the cover's great, and then obviously on the hardcover, I've got two interior pieces of art that were done by Joe Requesa, and geez, they're just something else. They're stunning. So
Man, yeah, I've seen those. They are amazing. I mean, all the art that you got done is so amazing. And yeah, Jeff Brown is like he's having a moment right now, So like, yeah,
he's
getting like pulling him is big deal, man. That's pretty awesome,
yeah. I think it was good timing. Lucky fortuitous timing at the time. So
right? And then
yeah.
also remind me, who was your editor?
So editor was Sarah Chorn,
That's what I thought.
and she's brilliant. I got to know about her through her book, The Necessity of Rain, which was one
Mm-hmm.
of my favorite books that I read last year. And then shortly after that, I realized that she was actually the editor for a lot of other authors that I love,
Mm-hmm.
including Mr. Ryan Kyle. So um,
Oh, that
that
guy,
kind of like steered
that
me
old guy.
towards, yeah, that guy, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah. It's ridiculous.
um,
Good times.
but yeah, that steered me towards her, and she was nothing short of brilliant, to say the least. Um, she's a genius. She understands story really, really well. She's got an incredible eye for detail, an incredible eye for nuance, actually. And
Yeah.
she was just good at getting, I think, the best potential out of the story when I sent it to her. So what came out of it from that draft um, it's pretty crazy, to be honest, when you look back. So one day I might kind of show people the difference that she made, but yeah, it was
But
incredible
not
to
this
kind
day.
of
Not
work with her. So
right, right, right.
so
No, yeah. Like, I mean, you've got such a quality product. You've brought together like I feel like this dream team to help build it, and of course, we're also joined here tonight by other folks that have been helping you out. Let's go through. How about Jonathan, then Livia, then Isaac? Would you guys like to introduce yourselves and maybe talk about how you've helped Josh a little bit on this process of bringing this wonderful book to the world?
As you said, I'm Jonathan Weiss. I'm the author of the Flux Catastrophe and the First Hythero series. I've helped Josh out how he's going to stream now.
I'm going.
Look, we've been friends ever since I joined the break-ins at the start of this year, and I've fielded a good couple of questions
Boom.
around release stuff and navigating the ins and outs of the various buttons you got to push to actually make a paperback happen properly. It's been a great ride, and reading like the earlier versions of the work, his novella, and then selling alongside him at the Supernova Sydney convention was a really awesome experience, and just a great way to get to know a guy.
Absolutely.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Very good. Very cool. All right. Livia, please go ahead and introduce and talk about how you've Josh holding up Livia's cover. Yep. Nice.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm the host of a podcast, Books and Done, and that is actually how I met Joshua first. I read his novella and I invited him to be the first author I was doing a spotlight on. So we talked in quite a bit on his book, and after that I'm also publishing interactive fiction on an Earth story. And when I got my own book out, I will say that Joshua actually helped me a lot, answering a lot of questions of how do you do that, or releasing a book. After that I got his arc and loved it. So
yeah, nice.
It's been a ride.
It has.
Very good. All right, and Isaac, go ahead and introduce yourself and what has been your role in helping this Joshua's novel come out into the world?
Well,
we're doubly prepared.
I've got my electronic copy with me.
Very nice.
So I was lucky enough to get into the break-ins, similar to Jonathan, and have been learning from the team ever since. And there's been some pleasant late-night phone calls or early morning phone calls to Australia to these fine gents. And Josh was a big help, and Jonathan was a big help in getting my first book, The Dragon Legion, across the finish line. So it's been a really exciting process, kind of, watching these things come to life from beta reads to launch. So congrats, Josh.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I love the community we've built. I love this about bookish, community at large, where everyone's, here and helping each other out. We want more good stories, and we know that Josh wrote a banger. So, we're happy to support it, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know about that.
When I read the arc, I started reading it, and I was like going on a family vacation, and I'm sitting there like in the car, like one more page. I hate these people. Why are they doing this? Come on, Josh.
Some of those angry messages I got from Isaac, fantastic.
I would stop and message him. I'd be like, "Why are you doing this to me?"
That's the best, right? When someone's like kind of like almost live tweeting your piece of work. That's pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
So one time I actually wrote him, and he answered, "I can neither deny nor confirm." I was like,
give
"How are
anything
you
away."
doing that?
Nice. Okay, so I thought next it would be fun for me to go ahead and I got Josh's permission to share with you guys, the audience, a little bit of reading. So I'm going to read chapter 1 for you guys, and I'll catch you at the chapter 1. Esme, heir to the throne of Adira, and all-round smartarse, hummed as she walked the lonely palace halls to her father's study. It was nearly midnight, and he had never come down for supper. A curious case, she supposed, but nothing too far-fetched. Her father was King Terrans, so he was known to her and her step-brother Seifel as the Overworker. He sought a throne not made of gold, but a throne of porcelain. The week had been filled with comings and goings, and despite her attempt to force some food into her father, she knew that the moment she walked in, he'd reject the offer to eat with her. Both the Aobian ambassadors were visiting from the Great Tree, as well as members of the governments of Piat, Gabat, and Sethi, respectively. Negotiations were underway, preemptive actions being taken, to ensure that there were alliances in place across the continent of Kara, after word spread of some terrifying inner workings happening in Therador, the tyrant-led empire at the heart of the Theradoran ranges. He said I'll go with glee to the privy, in the chamber where secrets unfold. Ha! She stifled a laugh at the song as she skipped down the hall. At the end came the yellow light from her father's study. She might have been singing about a prince who ejected golden nuggets from his rear, but it wasn't so far from the truth. Raynal. The other most sour aspect of their week. The Prince of Therador, son of the Emperor Jurin, had proposed to her again. The most vile and pernicious rat was no match for her ability to say no for the 10th time, however. There could be no alliance with Therador. They'd had their days of armistice after the war, and yet again they'd turned to secret projects, shielding their strange experiments from the outside world. A strain, a push. From forthwith, my tush. This had started a century ago, when members of the Theradoran High Church had discovered a way to use a power that did not belong to them, a power that predated humanity's time on the continent of Kara. She had never discussed with anybody what exactly this was. She only knew it by name. Luminosity. Sleepers in the great tree, known as Aeobia, wield it, but nobody knew what its limitations were, just that it came from the tree, a result of spiritual connection the people there shared with their home, which towered above the surrounding world. But the rumblings in the meetings she and her father had attended this week suggested that Jurin and his priests of dirt were close to finding a way to equip luminosity for themselves. It might not be long until they sabotaged the peace that had been upheld for more than 50 years across the northern part of the continent. A golden nugget! She sped up as she reached her father's study door, which was ajar. Unusual. In the direction from which she had come, she thought she felt a flash of light pass over her face. When she whipped her body around, however, the hall was dark. In my bowl. She rested her hand on the doorknob, which was made of polished white stone. It would annoy her dear dad, but he needed to take a break, and she had a line to finish. Of porcelain. She struck the door open dramatically, kneeling with her eyes shut, raising her hands to the heavens as she sang her final note. Ta-da! She called, though her father sat with his back to her, hunched over his desk. Oh, please, father, won't you eat something before you work yourself dogged through the night? She put a hand on his shoulder and peered around to see his face. But there was no face, just a hole where the gentle smile of her father had once been. She screamed, instinctively removing her hand from his shoulder. Father! She breathed. Father! Father! She was crying now, sobbing at the hollowed-out skull that once wore her father's face. Dead. All that stared back at her was a mixture of pulverized flesh, blood, and brittle bone. She retched, unable to scream her father's name as she vomited all over the desk. She was no child. Damn it, she was nearly 23, but she couldn't control the eruption that spilled over her lips, running down her white bedgown. Everything here was stained now. Her clothes, the floor, her life. All their lives. Clamoring feet began to sound from afar, like a stampede of bulls. Guards arrived at the door of the study to see Esme choking down vomit. Streaks of tears blurred her vision, making it impossible to see the oxidized red goop on the floor beside her father's chair. No, no, don't touch me! She yelled as guards pulled her away from the scene. She thrashed, struggling out of their grip, before her foot slipped through the pile of what was once the king's face on the polished stone floor, sending bits flying. Princess! The head of the guard, Murthorn, was here now. He scooped Esme up. Princess! He's gone. His furrowed eyes never changed. This man had watched over her since she was a child, and had worked for her father since he was but a boy. Through every tribulation, however, his expression was always the same. Stern, unwavering, grounding. He's gone now, he whispered, pulling her into an embrace. Esme heaved a lengthy, strained sigh, the kind that was so disrupted by torture it barely sounded human. And then she cried, long into the night, in the crevice between Murthorn's body and the destruction in the room beyond. So, what a chapter one, huh? I mean, like,
It's the good stuff.
That's a
It's the good
weighty
stuff,
ending,
man.
huh? What
Yeah,
Go ahead,
that
Josh.
chapter was that chapter was something that came much later in the writing process, actually.
Really? Because I was
Yeah.
going to ask about that. Like, is that how you initially opened the story? But yeah, if it's much later, like, how much later did it come for you?
It came before I sent it off for edits, but initially I wanted to write an epic fantasy book that did not use anything remotely related to a prologue device to begin the story. And part of that was just me being resistant to, the cliche of it. But then right before I sent the book off to Sarah, literally the week that I sent it off to Sarah, I just wrote it one night because I was stuck with something else to do with Esme's storyline actually. So I wrote that to try and give myself some context for what had happened. And then once I'd done it, I was like, you know what?
Kind of slaps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
and in fact, that chapter never changed. So I wrote it in 15, 20 minutes, sent it off to edit. Sarah didn't touch it. Proofreader didn't touch it. So I think maybe like 2 words changed in that. And
that's
that was
fate,
about
man.
it. So it worked. Yeah, it worked. It was a nice write, actually. It was a good writing session. I remember that one. So
Flow.
Super
yeah,
cool.
really
Yeah.
good flow. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to set up the mystery because what happens there basically triggers the whole plot or part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's also like in this book, especially, like I think mystery is a big part of it. And there's kind of like 2 big mysteries happening. So this is an important chapter because it as Livia said, it sets the tone, but it showcases the first mystery that we really need to know about. And prior, that wasn't really the case. So I think it added a lot of context that was needed for the story to work.
I was going to say, like, for me, it was like the ultimate reader contract. It was almost like watching a horror movie where, like, I knew that if, you know, the final girl goes down to the basement, there's going to be a guy in there that'll, you know, come out with a knife and all that. Like, I felt it coming, and yet it still hit me so damn hard. Like, I was lulled into a false sense of security by my own expectations, and then when it hit, like, it felt like it just went so far above and beyond in not only like fulfilling but exceeding the expectations I'd set for myself, because I thought I knew the trope, but it turns out I didn't. So like when I went into the next few chapters, I'm like, anything could happen to these poor bastards. Anything.
Oh,
Especially when
absolutely.
you're
And that was like,
hoping for good things. You're like, come on, Josh.
Yeah.
You had to, like, I'm sad now. What are you doing to me?
Yeah.
oh,
You look how here for it is. He's like, yeah, I mean,
I
just
love
sad.
it. I love it. I mean, but you know, it is hard though, because you've got to get that balance with the tone right. And I think it nearly pushed the book, I think, for some readers into being like a grimdark story. But then it really backs off from that tone after that point. Because I didn't really want that to be the case. But I felt like I just had to start with something that hard hitting to kind of show people what I could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta make
amazing.
them flinch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
I love you though. So, you know, I want to talk a little bit about like process. Yeah, I know that you want to, Josh, and also kind of process more broad about getting these, you know, our debut books out. But like, it's crazy though, right? How like sometimes there's like something that you work on, and it's like, okay, I think it's there. And sometimes you spend 20 minutes writing something, and you're like, well, I nailed it that time, right? Like, if only we could like capture that magic every time, right?
It's a frustrating process sometimes. Like there'll be these chapters where you're like, oh man, everything's got to click in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it doesn't, the whole book is going to buckle at the knees. And then you'll sit down and write that chapter. It's the most grueling, horrible experience. And it takes like 3 weeks to figure it out. And then there's chapters like this one where it just like came out of me 15 minutes, done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So Josh, like this is your first full-length novel, but obviously you wrote the novella previously, and that's already been out in the world. How did the 2 connect, and what made you want to do the novella first and then do this full-length novel?
The novella came out of a weird kind of place, I guess, in some ways, because basically I wrote this book and then sent it out to editors for a couple of months. That was what month was that? That was October.
1960s. No, just kidding.
Yeah. Handwritten, you know. Not actually. But yeah, so yeah, I wrote that, sent it out, and then basically I said to myself, oh, you need a break, man. Like so you know, let's stop writing for a couple of weeks. But then, you know, a few days went by and I was like, geez, I actually can't take that break. Like I just felt like compelled to like sit down and write something. So the novella was really fun because it was mostly a discovery, right? And it was important for me to be able to take one of the key characters in the main books she's not really a main character, so to speak. She does have a point of view, but it's a lot less. And I really wanted to flesh her out because I think her history is important for the series. So that was a lot of fun because I basically just sat down, did like a NaNoWriMo over October and smashed the whole thing out in about 2.5 weeks. And again, it was one of those writing experiences that just flew out of me. So totally different to some parts of the novel where, my brain was fried and I was trying to kind of juggle all these things that were happening. This was just singular point of view. The hardest part was probably alternating between two timelines in that book. But besides that, it was a natural writing experience and really important because it actually changed how I approached the beginning of my publishing career. Because I hadn't actually considered releasing a novella at all when I was writing. So, and then I ended up launching with that novella because it seemed to work and early readers were really enjoying it. So, yeah.
That's the first work that I got of Josh is to get a little taste of his writing, and I was like, I just thought, wow, this guy can tell a story. Like, it's such a gripping novella from the beginning. You're like, tell me more about the sleepers. Like, this is just so cool. Like, it just gives you a real taste of the world building. It's so much fun.
Nice. And like, and I assume that continued as you were reading Exile, the novel, right?
Yeah, it just gets better and better. It gives you such a layer of backstory. And, at first you're not sure, why am I not seeing more of this character? And then you go, oh, wait a minute, there she is. And then you think, this world is huge, and like the history of it is so fascinating, right? And so you just get little snippets, and he's good at weaving them in.
Nice. I don't know, Livia. Like, of course, the novella was your first exposure to Joshua's writing, and good enough for you to want to get him on your podcast, right?
Yeah, and it was actually quite an adventure because I saw it. I actually like the cover, never get into a book because of the cover, but I like the cover. I said, oh, he's Oshi. That's it. I'm going to read it. And I went through it, and I think I liked two things the most. One, the world. I thought it was super different and super immersive. And I liked the fact that it felt lived in. There were details, I'm trying hard not to spoil, that actually gave me the idea that there was a history behind, that there was mystery or myth that had blended into the culture. And that was something that, at least to me, it makes the world pop up from the page. It gives it that quality of there is more than the eye can see here. And then also the fact of Nisha's character and how we see her reacting in the present line, different to how we see her in the past line. I thought she was very well fleshed out, and something that I was actually looking forward to reading in a female character written by a male author. Right? I think it's a nice, and I think Yosh did again with the female characters on Exile. That I have been chasing you about, speaking about some of them. Tari is a great character, and I liked how my opinion of her changed throughout the story. Like, he teased me very well at the start with her. And the more chapters went by, the more my opinion changed. And I think that managing to do that is a skill not every author has, like changing a reader's opinion about a character.
Nice. Yeah.
You flatter me. I appreciate it, though.
Jonathan, anything you want to jump in, kind of add to the discussion here?
Well, look, like everyone else, the novella was my first kind of exposure to Josh's writing as well. But I think hearing him talk about it at Supernova as well to people and kind of tell people on the inspirations behind it, that was a really interesting. Like, I was just sitting there, kind of leaning over with my ear kind of a bit closer, just so I could overhear it a bit better. Just because I think it's a really interesting way to see, what's the driving concept that actually inspired the world in the first place, rather than like the plot or anything else. Like, because I think as fantasy writers, plots are cool, but the main thing that comes to us first is going to be the world, right? So just overhearing that was a really cool thing to hear, and like almost the technical details we were getting into. And I see it in the writing as well, like even just the first chapter or two, Drift in the novel, like, talking about how technical it is to maintain the algae. Like, that's a really well thought out system, and like you really put a lot of time and passion into that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, one of the things that I remember when we were actually doing Supernova together, one thing that Jonathan's really good at, you should try to hear him do it, but he's so good at pitching his books.
I know.
So it was a good learn, actually, because I was taking in a lot of how he was doing it, and I think I changed my elevator pitch, like, I don't know, what was it, like 3 or 4 times over the course of that weekend.
Yeah, and like I could see like it was a marked difference each time as well. Like it became just so effective each time. Like you were iterating so well.
Yeah, you got to learn from the masters, right?
Right.
But yeah, and I think like the thing about my books that I think sometimes I undersell because I write it, so I'm not really thinking about it actively, is just the amount of angles I could take with the pitch. That's something that Jonathan showed me, is that you can take an angle that is plot related, but then you can take an angle that is world building related, and if you do that, it's like an entirely different beast at that point.
Exactly.
So oftentimes when I'm trying to talk about this book especially, there's just so much going on. If you look at the blurb that's on the back of the book, it's very plot related. But if I break it down into like, influenced by Toy Story, murder mystery, bioluminescent sciences, it just sounds crazy, So, sorry, Isaac.
Sell it to us. Give us your pitch. Come on.
Yeah,
give
us 5 barrels.
Come on.
Yes.
Give
Like,
your readers.
imagine I'm holding it. How do you get me to open it up?
So Toy Story and bioluminescent. All right, I'm interested.
See, that's what I usually go for. But then people are like, "What Toy Story? Where are you getting that from?" So, but yeah, the inciting incident was inspired by Toy Story, actually. So, which is, to this day, the greatest movie ever made, and I'll die on that hill.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, basically, I mean, okay, let's try to pitch it. Okay, let's go with
He's like, is it pitch A, B, C? What do I do?
Yeah, there's so many different angles I could take.
Yeah, let's say let's go back to Supernova. Just put that in your mind.
Yeah. So an epic political fantasy.
Okay.
Inspired by Middle Eastern and European culture. Fused with badass fighting anthropomorphic weasels. People that can suck in light.
Yes.
And now I'm running out of things to add to that.
I'm running out of
adjectives. And a giant tree.
Big ass tree, man.
Huge damn tree on the cover.
People like big structures.
Yeah,
yes, they do.
It's true.
That was a good pitch. I am impressed.
Yeah.
So that's a lovely pitch, Joshua. Josh, I love that. That's a really solid pitch. I like that. I mean, the weasels part has me a little, intrigued, but like everything sounds really badass.
Yeah, I think weasels get everyone interested in some way. They're pretty light on in this book, to be fair. There's a lot more of them in the rest of the gods, and there will be a significant amount more of them in the next novella, which is something I'm yet to properly announce.
Fair. Well, and I know like the rest of you have read at least, part of Exile. So let's start with Jonathan, the pitch master. Like, what like if you're thinking of a friend that you might recommend this book to, like what other books do they enjoy, and what is sort of like what are you going to tell that friend to be like, no, this is the one that you got to read because of that big tree or whatever it is,
Look, I'd say if I was going to pitch Exile specifically, I'd say it really feels like It honestly feels a lot like a Studio Ghibli kind of work, right? Like,
nice.
It feels like there's this enormous world where the life of the characters is so technically intertwined with the nature around them, the way that they're in sync with it, and then all these kind of complex and ancient systems and rituals they have set up around it. That's what it really feels like to me. So, like, I'd say, like, honestly, if I was pitching it to a friend, I'd just say it really feels like Neseska, I keep forgetting how to pronounce it, Valley of the Winds, like where it's just this kind of enormous idea, but you're focused on kind of a like a small adventure as it starts to really spiral out and you see more of it. Like it's just a perfect kind of drip feed of like new bits and pieces of the world as you go through.
Nice. Lots of fans of those Studio Ghibli films. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Good one.
me included. Yeah.
Yep.
Nice. Olivia, same question. Like, how would you kind of pitch the book, and like, who would you sort of pitch it to?
So somebody who hasn't read fantasy, I think this will be a perfect entry-level book. It's very easy to read. It's not convoluted, and it doesn't. The plot and the world building, I think they are very complex. But Yosh managed not to throw it in the face of anyone. You know, it builds up alongside the plot, and I have found that world building can be an entry barrier for some people. And I think this one is great because of that. Also, the prose is very nice and it's very easy to read as well. And I will pitch it probably for fans of Brandon Sanderson. I think it's the same type of complex world and prose that doesn't get in the way, that you can just read and enjoy the world, the characters, without having their, you know, something that is, oh, I need to write this, I need to find this word in the dictionary. You know, that doesn't happen. And that can be very immersion breaking, you know. But
Yeah.
and also something else, it's people or readers trying to find a variety of characters, because every character here is different. It's not like you find the clone over there that is moodier, darker, broodier, whatever. Everyone here feels unique.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, I appreciate that too. Like I like when a book will like maybe add like 1 or 2 words to my vocabulary, but when I need like a dictionary every 2 pages, I'm like, this is I didn't know I was signing up for homework, you know?
Yeah.
But go ahead, Isaac.
What was that? Unapologetically Australian. I think that's the way you put it.
Yeah.
Nice.
My little grammar note at the start.
The best. The absolute best. Yeah. Well, and
Nice.
I've been pulled up on that from my proofreader about like specific Australianisms, where she had to ask, "Is this actually a typo, or is this something you say down there?"
Yeah, I get it, because I message him sometimes like, I don't know what you're trying to do here, but this isn't a real word. He's like, not where I live.
All right. So we need to pitch it to Australians and people that want to learn more about Australian culture. But you know, other than that, Isaac, like what's the pitch? You know?
I don't think it's just Australian. I think, you know, Josh's writing is universal because it's accessible and relatable. So like the characters that Josh writes in the world that he writes in are your every man, your every woman, and it balances this really interesting way of storytelling through the challenges of those everyday people to the challenges of kings and nations and royalty and politics. And it makes it something that anybody who is interested in not just fantasy, but mystery, action, adventure, exile, some of those themes that pull through the whole book, it makes it accessible to anybody. So anybody that could pick this up, not just a fantasy fan, but a mystery fan, etc. And I think if I were to compare this to the most popular genre of storytelling, it would be, this is Avatar meets Crocodile Dundee. No offense, Josh. But this is adventure meets a world of magic where magic is intertwined with the very people of the earth. So it's a very cool story.
Love it. Very nice. What do you think, Josh? You think they're nailing it, or are they missing anything?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, something I was going to say, Isaac kind of reminded me of, is Isaac was saying people are part of the magic specifically, and something that that is kind of Australian related is something that I've always been really interested in, which is the culture of the Aboriginal people in Australia. I've always just been so kind of taken by how impressive their Indigenous history is, their art, especially the kind of like the spirituality of the dream time. And I think another thing about the original people is the idea that they're kind of custodians of the land. And they understand innately how the land works. So they respond to the land and the land responds to them. And it's something I've always thought is beautiful about kind of like the agricultural processes, if you like, of the Aboriginals. And that was something that I consciously injected into this world, because the aliens in this world, they are the original custodians of the land. They've had their land kind of settled on and dominated by other people, so humans in this case. And I didn't want the book to be a really overt criticism of colonialism, but it's in there for a reason, because it's something I really care about. And I think that, you know, the magic especially was something that I really wanted to kind of show off as this thing that the original people were able to hold and kind of use. The other people can't. And I think that speaks strongly of them. So yeah, that was just something that Isaac reminded me of when he mentioned Crocodile Dundee, which is the other end of Australian entertainment and culture. But yeah,
I love that. I love it. Yeah. And I think that's the perfect segue to reading a little bit more of the story. So we'll do that. Hold your breath, Sedulus roared as the almighty wave closed in around them. Drift felt himself go under, felt the stream of water fill his nostrils. He closed his eyes. When he finally broke the surface, Sedulus was beside him, one firm hand clasped onto the raft. Get on, Sedulus cried. Once Drift was up, it was easy enough for his superior to get on it too. The raft moved of its own accord, but where they could, Drift and Sedulus alternated using their hands as oars, trying to guide the raft around stoned and undulations on the forest floor. The water was so swollen now, it had grown like a tumor, so high that it nearly spilled over the viaduct, which lay ahead of them, only a few hundred meters away. It was already a colossal drop from the forest floor beneath the great tree to the border of Adira. The violent waves risked them going over the waterfall. It was truly dark now, night having set in already. With the water flooding the forest floor, the visibility had reduced significantly, luminous plants and fungi unable to share their light. Amongst all odds, however, Drift and Sedulus were able to get close enough to the sack of elementals that drifted by them in the water. Drift's hands were wet and shaking with a mixture of fear and cold when he and Sedulus finally got the sack onto the raft. He couldn't untie the end. Roots below, Sedulus shouted. Undo the bag, Drift. Do you want an exile order on your head? On all our heads? Exile. That would be the punishment if they did not fix this. The sickness in the river needed to be stopped before it reached the Adiran people. Clean river water had been the promise that had kept their alliance for a century. Through a crazed effort to tear the Hessian holding the elementals in, Drift and Sedulus got the sack open and began to pour its powdery contents into the water. Drift could only hope Layward, Emil, and Sovereign were doing the same on their rafts, though they were nowhere to be seen. He looked up as the bag ran its course, staring at what was coming. The water was going to carry them over the viaduct wall. Sir? Sir! Sedulus whipped his head around, his eyes filled with horror. An exile order either way then. That would be their fate. In Aobia, crime alone did not necessitate an exile. Leaving also did. And any Aobian who was cut off from the heart, mind, and soul of the great tree was nothing to them anymore. They would never be permitted to return. Row! Use whatever energy you have left and row! Gods be damned! It was to no avail, and the raft swept against the rickety viaduct wall, crashing into it. For a moment they sat there, beaten mercilessly by the waves, smacking into the viaduct. Sedulus began uncoiling the rope attached to his harness, fitting it around one of the great wood posts that held the viaduct up in the ominous waterfall. Drift began to do the same before the raft gave way, and water suddenly dropped, letting the rift slip under the viaduct entirely. He and Sedulus fell, and he felt a tremendous burst of pain near his spine as he landed on a rock. He flailed about, teetering on the edge of the rushing waterfall. A firm hand seized his wrist, dragging him off the rock. Sedulus was swinging from the viaduct's frame, harness secured. Drift took his superior's wrist in return, and watched as Sedulus concentrated on trying to lift him back up. But the water kept rushing, consuming. It was nearly smoldering like a fire, not with heat, but life. The river seemed to be crying out in pain from that which infected it, and frothy water churned past Drift's legs. He slipped again as he made it up to Sedulus's height, and his feet came away from the rocks below. Dangling in the air, his weight pulled Sedulus forwards, the tension of his harness rope close to breaking. Twang! Drift felt the line drop them a meter or more, causing him to scrape his arms along a sharp rock. He growled in pain and watched as water washed the grazed blood away. He panicked, trying to swing away from it, but stopped in his tracks. Whatever he did, he'd be taking Sedulus with him. If this water already carried the sickness, he wouldn't want it in a wound or on his body. Maybe Sedulus had to let off some slack before he could pull Drift back up. Surely he hadn't unraveled all the rope. Twang, Drift could see past the waterfall now. The world below loomed like a hungry mouth ready to swallow. One fall was all it would take, and life as he knew it would end forever. If he didn't die, he'd still be cut off from Aeobia. He looked in Sedulus's eyes, and neither of them spoke. Both of them were thinking the same thing. Twang, another drop over the waterfall, and Sedulus's face was wrinkling with the pain of holding on to him, the exertion. His line was about to snap. His twisted face said it all as Drift opened his mouth in shock horror. "I'm sorry," Sedulus cried, and then it came all at once, without so much as a snap. Sedulus let go. Drift fell, screaming, hitting rock after rock, trying to keep his arms by his head so he did not strike it. The night fell quiet, but for the tiny splash Drift made at the bottom of the waterfall, 100-meter fall that could have easily been mistaken as a rock chipping over the edge, a blur in the rest of the chaos that the waterfall presented. The current spun him around, and he couldn't see where the water was bending in the dark. Then something smacked his head, and everything went dark.
First off, I'm going to say, the way that Josh has started his story, chapter 1 grabs you, and chapter 4 throws you in the river, and you're just swept away. It is such, and pun intended, it is such an awesome way to start a story, and it caught me in the first, 20 minutes that I started reading, and I couldn't put it down the whole vacation. And so I think that it will surprise people, but it's a very exciting story, and it's very enjoyable to read, and it's got an awesome pace to it that keeps you wanting more. So,
can I comment how I felt like the Padme meme? Because Joshua sent only like 20% of the arc, and I was just like, you didn't end in a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of it?
Can we all actually just really quick, before I even open it to you, Josh, round of applause, because like there is the biggest space between like people that say I want to write a book and like, Stephen King level bestsellers is finishing a book. And you've done that, my friend. You've done that. It's launch day today. Not only did you finish the book, but you edited it, you got the cover, you did all the kind of the businessy work, and now it's here. Kudos to you, bud. Kudos to you.
I appreciate that.
So what are some of your thoughts about, this process getting here?
Yeah. I think the reason I wanted to talk about this was because all of us that are here today, and I know a lot of other friends, we have very unique experiences of book launch. And I think that's important to look at, especially for anyone who might be watching that is writing or looking to publish. But we've had the benefit of talking to each other as we go on. So I've seen Jonathan launch a couple of books now. I've seen Isaac launch his book, and Olivia as well. And all of us have had like slightly different celebration moments and slightly different obstacles. And it's funny how it works out, but it's also, I think, a good learn for people who are thinking about going through this process themselves. So I thought that might be kind of like a good angle to take the conversation. Because, it really changes person to person. And, even for Isaac and myself and Nick in the break-ins, we've seen some crazy launch stories. So, so I figured it's a good opportunity to maybe talk through some of that. I don't know if we want to like go around and talk about our experiences.
Sure. Should we start? Well, let's start with Olivia. You've just had a launch pretty recently. What are kind of your the ups and downs and lessons learned and those sorts of things?
Well, first of all, that's it.
Bam.
Thank you. So first of all, it was a bit different than launching interactive stories that I had written before.
Right.
Like at that moment when I launched that, I had already 8 interactive books out. But for those, it's generally, I also had to fight against or deal with people's preconceptions of what interactive fiction can be and what a book with choices is. So when I got this one out, it was like I could actually just focus on the book and on this content because everyone knows what a book is, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I was actually struggling a bit to compare it to anything, especially because comparisons doesn't really work to me as a reader. Like when I get a comparison, A meets B, it generally doesn't work for me. So that's something else, that I think can affect how we launch the book, how we are as a reader, right? Because we need to understand that the readers we may get, they may not be just like us. They may enjoy something different, or they may need a different pitch, and so on. So to me, at least, I already knew people, especially because of the books with choices that I had launched before. And I think that also helped me with everything, especially because I could rely on some people to help me with the launch, or in Josh and in other authors who had actually released a book, not a book with choices, and could help me, with the administrative stuff. And at the same time, there was so much going on, get the cover ready, get the ebook there, prepare the audiobook that I was preparing. I think at the same time of the launch, during that week, I was also proof listening to the audiobook. So it was crazy. And yeah, and I had to redo the cover like 3 times, changing at the adjustments, because the first time, like, these words were like so dark, it couldn't be read. And at least I did the cover, so that helped. But there were so many issues that I wasn't really expecting to have. And I think that because we are indie authors, even when we have developmental editors and all of that, we end up being a one-person army, assembling everything, launching, doing marketing, preparing, and that takes a toll,
Right.
because it's release day and it's just like, finally, it's like all the exhaustion raining in because of everything that you have to do. So yeah. And of course, I think that I wasn't expecting to have that much joy from seeing my book in other people's shelves. Like I was lucky enough for some copies to arrive on the day of the launch, and just waking up in Australian hours to see my book in people's shelves. I think that that was amazing.
That's true, because that is something that you don't get with the interactive fiction, right? You never see
Yeah.
that physical
It's like
story that's on some. Yeah.
they look like that,
Right.
and I have seen like a lot of people have read them, and but
Yeah.
they also just resort to putting up a screenshot rather than the phone in the hand, and it's not the same as having the physical
Right.
out there,
Still cool,
Yeah,
but
it's
yes, not
still
the
cool,
same,
but
not
yeah,
the
it's
same. Yeah,
different.
yeah. That's cool, and I totally agree with you. I think that there's no smooth launch, right? I don't know anyone that's like been like, well, everything just happened the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, and the last day before, like, I forgot to do X, whatever X that is, and it's always going to happen,
Yep. Go ahead, Isaac.
I know exactly what you mean. I got the problems with proofs very early on. Ingram was my friend. Amazon was my friend. We all got along famously. It was a really interesting experience. I will say,
Covers, Isaac.
yeah. How could I forget? So like, I think the most interesting part about all of this is how much fun it is, and then just the satisfaction of holding your book and then sliding it on your bookshelf. Like, nothing beats it. Not money,
So good.
nothing. It's so much fun. And then because you spend your whole life as a reader holding books, and ebooks are great. I read a lot of ebooks, but there's something magical about holding a book, putting it on your shelf. And so for me, like, that was a real awesome moment. And I think you can talk tools and tactics about launch, and you can talk about, here are the strategies that I followed. They change so rapidly, and people use so many different mediums to get their information out there, that there's no bad way to do it anymore. It all works. And so like we get so obsessed and with perfecting the way that we're going to launch these things that I think you get your stories out there and you let readers read them, and if they're good, they'll carry you through.
Fair. Nice. Jonathan, you want to chime in, being the resident expert here with the million launches that you've already done, and
Oh, I wouldn't call myself an
17?
expert. I'd say keen enthusiast. I'm up to 5 by now. And like, yeah, it is really special to have it in your hands. But I think the thing is, like, I'm now, I'd say, about 18 months beyond launching the first book, my first novella. You gotta never stop launching. That's your headset, because, and this is something that my wife, they're an artist, and they deal with all the stuff of being an independent artist as well. You never can forget that people who are coming to your social media pages, people who are meeting you in person, they have never ever encountered the fact that you have wrote a book before. And that's something that I really had to kind of learn, both for the way my social media works and the way that I talk to people at markets. Like, it's cool, I've launched a book, but like, as far as like sequels go, which I've been doing now for launches, you need to really intrinsically tie in the first book to that launch, because that's still the entry point, right? That's still where people are getting in. So yeah, as you keep launching those books, just don't forget what you left behind, and make sure that still feels special to you and still is something that you're making special to new people that are coming in.
it's a really good tip that I wouldn't have thought of, because I'm not in the positions you're in. But that's a good point. And to Isaac's point about how there's so many different ways to launch and whatnot, it makes me like, I think ZS Diamante, another one of the break-ins, he does that so well. But like every book, because he's got his full trilogy out, but like he's not just talking about Stone and Ruin book 3. He's talking, hey, I've got a full trilogy out. So like, if you're looking for a full trilogy, start with Stone and Sky. Yeah, that's smart. That's a good point.
I was going to add like one more bit as well. Like,
yes,
even if the launch doesn't go spectacularly, like my first couple of launches, they felt underwhelming to me. Like, I didn't work hard enough on ARC readers, or the ARC readers didn't follow through, stuff like that. Sure, it sucks, but again, you can pick yourself up and keep going with that. Like, you've still got the book out there. That's the main thing you had to do. The launch isn't the make or break for the book. You can still come back to it and keep working to get it into readers' hands. Like, it still works just great.
Yeah, and it's also a bit exponential. Like, the more books you have out, the more that the readers are willing to invest in that particular author, because you already have a catalog, right? It's not like they are just going to end up with an unfinished series, like has happened before, and yeah, I think that also helps, to seeing that the author is also consistently releasing or consistently active. That also helps, and it helps build up. It's not that one pick and that's it. You are always there. It will always grow the more that you do, the more that the work goes out. And everything that, as Jonathan said, we are always launching. Like, everything you do, even like an interview or whatever, it ends up there, and people can still find you, and people will still find you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I think I think a lot about kind of the way that books kind of have second lives, right? Or 9 lives, 10 lives. Like, books are immortalized from the moment that they're there. And I watch a lot of BookTube, and something it's kind of find interesting as the years go on. People start to find stuff again, like Jenny Words, like one of my dad's favorite authors. And now it seems like she's really starting to grab a whole new audience, online. It's so cool to see. She's been writing for years at this point. It's like people are just discovering her for the first time. So I think it's important to remember that you can have your time again and again and again with a book. So that's cool, right? It's a cool thing.
So really think about writing that really weird sex scene, because books are going to last forever. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's it.
That's not where I go with that.
I might edit that part out. We'll see.
Yeah.
10 years. Have you been like writing little scraps of like notes for 10 years?
Yeah.
Or yeah?
Yep. Yeah, I got scraps of notes everywhere. The original idea came to me when I was in uni, actually. And we were doing, so I did a liberal arts degree, and one of the things I studied there was philosophy. I love philosophy, but occasionally if something was like too kind of like over my head, I would just pull out like a Neil Gaiman book and just read in the back of the theatre. And so I was kind of like mixing like stuff that the lecturer was saying with like, you know, these rich kind of ideas about mythology and stuff that Neil Gaiman's writing about in, you know, Sam. And, so the book had these weird origins in part of my life. And then I started coming up with like this idea of like, okay, those stupid roller droids from Star Wars. I don't know, what are they called? Does anyone know what they're called? I don't
The
remember.
BB-8s?
No,
The
they're
R2-D2s?
dumb. They're like the ones in
think they're
Phantom
called-
Menace that like go in the bubble.
Yeah, I think they're called
Oh!
destroyer droids, but like I
Yeah.
call them roly polies. But
Yeah, roly polies. Yeah, that's what I called them as a kid. But I had the idea for what if you could get like an army of people that would like go and fight, and then they would kind of like pause their fighting at nighttime and like recharge inside of like a personal like force field, like a mixture of like bubble soccer and like those roly poly droids. And that's kind of like what kickstarted off like the idea for the magic system. But then I started reading a lot
so
about
great.
yeah, it's weird, right? Like the way that your brain starts to merge influences, it's really strange. And then I started reading about the ways that trees network and about, you know, the science of fungi and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, I just started figuring out ways to fuse all of this stuff together.
I'm like obligated to drop in a picture of Adrian M. Gibson in the video right now.
Just fade it in slowly and then fade it out slowly again.
You should actually do that.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, I love the different influences. And some days, like, yeah, the way these ideas like percolate for so long, and you know, now shared with the world. You know.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Couldn't be more excited for you, Josh, on your launch. Congratulations! It's an awesome day, an awesome week. Soak it up.
Thanks, man.
Oh, look, congratulations again, man, and to many more. Like, I know you're already hard at work pumping out the rest of them, but yeah, let's see if you can get them out as fast as I can.
Yeah.
That's your challenge.
The gauntlet has been thrown. Yep.
Yeah.
I love that.
And congratulations on the book, and also thank you for giving us those characters. It was amazing to be able to go through that world and to meet them in general. So thank you for that, and to many more.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
It's so good to be able to talk about it with you guys and, you know, get your thoughts, and it's just great. So thank you all for coming.
Of course, man.
Absolutely. And so, Josh, the book is out now. Where is the sort of best place for people to go and grab a copy?
Yeah, so it's available on Amazon today. I've got pre-orders that I'm taking for physical copies. They'll be arriving very shortly. There are still some, not many, signed and numbered versions of my cover with the beautiful artwork. So definitely consider grabbing one of those before they go. And otherwise, I think physicals will also be available on Amazon once they launch, and potentially in some bookstores as well. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's looking promising. The future's looking bright, which is good.
Oh yeah. So, at some point is the hardcover with all of the cool interior art, like both of the pieces of cool interior art, is that going to be available on Amazon at some point, or is it only going to be like direct sales from you, or what's the plan there, Josh?
The hardcover, I'm hoping, will be the widespread hardcover that's available all of the time.
Perfect.
But I do want to make sure that when the books come out, people have an opportunity to get them, have them signed and numbered, and kind of have them as like an exclusive launch copy. So I'm doing that first, and then once that run is done, I'll start to widen the distribution there. And that way, at least, it means that, like, hopefully, as the series grows, I can continue to do a launch book for each new one in the series, and then people who have kind of been around since day one, it's kind of my way of saying thank you. So, yeah.
So go get yourself a signed, numbered copy. Heck yeah, get them while they last. That's awesome.
That's it. Got to catch them all.
Gotta get them all. Right. Very good. All right, Joshua, thank you for being here. Jonathan, Livia, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it, everyone. And thank you for watching. What are you even doing here? Go get that copy we just told you. You guys are really going to love Exile. So go pick it up. And if no one's told you today, you're an absolute legend.